Welcome to A Ride on the Outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Oh, Zan, it has felt like forever since we've last done one of these. It's only been a week off, but it still has felt like forever because March is just such a grueling month. But welcome everybody to the MMA Outsiders, episode number 31. That's Sam Bando. I'm Tom Albano. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure to subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Get it out of the way early. Follow the Empty the Bench Network on YouTube. Subscribe to the Empty the Bench Network on YouTube. Pardon me. YouTube.com/ETB Network. Make sure to follow us across the social medias at MMA Outsiders ETB, and do the same for the podcast network: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at ETB Network. That's Sam Bando, my colleague here. You can find his work over at bjpen.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Zambando99. I'm Tom Albano. You can find my work over at Fansided MMA, and you can follow me on Twitter at Thomas J. Albano. All right. All that out of the way now, Zam, because we've got a lot that we've got to get into. Obviously, we had plans for a whole big show last week with the UFC 286 recap. Conor McGregor's little interview with Ariel Helwani, in which he was just, being Conor McGregor at this point. That's all I can really say. Francis Ngannou basically saying that, he's had serious conversations with PFL 1, but nothing's come out of that. And just a whole bunch of drama. But you know what, Zan? A lot of that drama has circumvented itself into this week because we have a lot of fight news to talk about when it comes to previews, when it comes to recaps, when it comes to potential title shots. And Zan, you also got the chance to interview one of the fighters who is competing this weekend.
Yeah, I sure did. So for those of you who don't know, it is officially out. As of earlier this week, I was able to speak with Daniel James, who is headlining Bellator 293 against Marcelo Gomez, and it was just a really good conversation. And he's really hopeful that he can return to Chicago and fight in front of his fans. And he said it was truly just an amazing experience. He actually did tell me a little sneak preview. He actually did tell me that when he got the call, he was very surprised that he would be competing in Temecula, California versus, I don't know, maybe somewhere closer to home. But he is very excited and is looking forward to the fight. He said a full 10-week camp, and he just seemed in very good spirits. So you can check that out. It's on the Empty the Bench YouTube channel, where you can find it there under all of the MMA Outsider stuff that we do, and you'll also be able to find a written form piece of that later this week, and you can check that out on bjpen.com for those of you who don't want to watch the full interview. So just wanted to get that out of the way. Daniel James, I was able to interview him, and he will be competing on Friday night at Bellator 293 in Temecula, California, against a guy who's resurrected his career since being cut from the UFC a couple years ago. So it should be very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk about Bellator 293. We'll talk about the Gomez James fight. We'll talk about also the PFL, Zan, officially kicking off this weekend. Yes, there was that Newcastle card, which nobody in the United States could watch. Good job. But the 2023 season officially kicks off this weekend in Las Vegas with log name Marias Wilkinson Santos. You've got Gamebred Boxing 4, which, Zan, you'll be live for. You'll be showing off some highlights there from all the action that takes place live.
Yeah, I'm very excited. This will be my third event that I'll get to cover under bjpen.com. So far I've been able to do Bellator 288 and an OVE event earlier this year. So it'll be nice to check out not only a Gamebred show, but my first ever boxing event ever. I've never been to a boxing show as media or as a fan, and there's some notable names that you guys will probably recognize. You guys can watch those fights beginning at 5:30 on Saturday, and they are available on UFC Fight Pass, which is a benefit if you could not make it to the Pfizer Forum in Milwaukee. So I will be there for an incentive for bjpen.com, but I'm sure I will have some content for Empty the Bench podcast network as well. Oh, and it should be a tremendous time. And as you know, Tom, I like to travel, and as you know, I really do enjoy combat sports, so I get to mesh those two worlds together, and it should be a great time. I'm looking forward to it.
For sure. All right. So, Sam, before we get into any of the MMA side of things, we've got some breaking news. Well, by the time you've probably seen this all out there, it's probably a little bit older at this point, but this is one of those breaking news things for those of you who were sleeping under a rock and completely missed it last night, as this broke just hours before, I'd say a good 12 or so hours before this episode starts to air. Zain, one of the biggest fights in boxing that we have been anticipating this year, is now going to happen. It is official. We've heard the whispers about this date, about this fight. It is now locked in. Devin Haney will defend the undisputed lightweight championship against the former lightweight king Vasyl Lomachenko on May 20th in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about the super fight of all super fights, and you want to talk about how people like to harp on the fact that, fights don't get made when they're supposed to. Well, this is one of those fights that does not fall into that category. This is a fight that fans have been anticipating for several months now against two highly skilled fighters, guys with a lot of similar wins on their resume, and the guy in Devin Haney who loves protecting his home turf. And if it does happen to be Las Vegas as the targeted location, he's going to have a lot of fans behind him, as Lomachenko will be going into enemy territory, if you will. And I think you would agree with me on this, Tom, but this is one of those coin flip fights where you can't wait, but it's so difficult to pick a winner just given the pedigree of over 70 plus fights between them, and it'll be very entertaining.
For sure. I mean, Zain, it was only a few years ago that Vasyl Lomachenko was dominating this division, and it didn't seem like anybody else was going to be better than him. And now Devin Haney has completely, Zain, over the last couple of years, risen up. Like he is a star. He is one of the stars of boxing right now. Is Devin Haney, and we have basically seen Devin Haney take over this division, but Vasyl Lomachenko, we have also seen in a couple of fights and look like things could be going wrong, and then he gets right back into it. So I kind of agree with you that this could be an absolute coin flip fight. I don't even know if I have an early prediction at this point. I'm just very excited that this fight is getting made. And this is going to be a battle of two big stars, one being Devin Haney, who you mentioned, if this is going to be taking place in Las Vegas, is going to have a whole home base behind him. And then you got Vasyl Lomachenko, who is going to have a whole country behind him. So this is going to be fun.
Speaking of Las Vegas, yes, according to BoxRec.com, it will be taking place at the MGM Grand. So yes, Devin Haney will have the home ring advantage, if you will.
So it's going to be home crowd advantage versus a man who, Zain, is going to have a whole country behind him. This is going to be absolutely fun. Two of the most talented boxers in the world right now. I'm excited. And on top of that, Zain, earlier that day is, I believe, the Katie Taylor fight in the United Kingdom.
It sure is, and that'll be on DAZN. So it'll be a very packed day for the streaming crowd. You'll be able to watch. You'll be able to watch the Katie Taylor fight on DAZN, and then more than likely, you'll be able to watch the Devin Haney fight on ESPN Plus pay-per-view, making it a star-studded day for all boxing fans. And as a enjoyment factor, there's no major UFC that weekend, so it's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, very true. So boxing fans, you don't have any competition to worry about. Combat sports fans, you can just sit back, relax, and enjoy boxing from basically, if you're in the East Coast, you're in the United States like I am, from the middle of the afternoon all the way to the night. Should be a fun one.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, being on the Central Time Zone, I'm on a similar boat. There, No, but it may end for me before 1 a.m. versus for you it may end before 2 a.m.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah.
The one bad part about being in the East Coast when it comes to UFC cards or boxing cards is that it goes late into the night.
Absolutely. But when you got two of the most high level boxers in the world, it doesn't matter what time it's at because everyone's going to be able to watch it. So,
Absolutely. Amen. All right. So we weren't with you last week. So we didn't really get to talk about UFC 286. Briefly, let's mention the main event. Leon Edwards. Well, then I get to eat crow right now. Leon Edwards managed to eke out the decision win over Kamaru Usman to retain the welterweight championship. The judges got it right. It was at the very least 3-2 Leon. And, you know, it's his time now. Kamaru, honestly, Zan, Kamaru did not look great compared to what we normally see with Kamaru.
no, he didn't. And I can't confirm nor deny this. And you can maybe agree, but I was watching the fight and did it look to you like Usman was somewhat injured in some ways? Like it didn't look like his step was totally as it normal. Yes, he didn't look as fast as he normally
No,
does. Did you notice the same thing?
I don't know if I can say injured for certain, but he definitely looked a step behind, one way or another.
Yeah, that was my overall point. But I will say though, Leon Edwards cut out all the nonsense. He was fighting in his hometown. Everyone thought there was going to be pressure on him, and he just went out and did his thing. I mean, I don't really think he cared necessarily that Usman, was this, just masterful champion, whatever. He went out and treated it like it was any other normal fight, and as he should. Now he's the man with the throne, if you will, and this kind of leads to a point that I haven't gotten to yet. With Usman losing two in a row, we kind of already know what's next for Leon Edwards, and we're going to get to that in a second and our takes on it because it's been a hot topic across the entire MMA community. You can't go on social media or any of these other outlets without reading about it.
If it wasn't for the fact of the the Devin Haney Vasyl Lomachenko breaking news, we would have led with this story.
Yeah, we would have led with the story for sure. But before we even get there, Tom, given who's at the top of the welterweight division, who do you think is next for the former undisputed UFC welterweight champion in Kamaru Usman? Because your options are limited.
Yeah, and honestly, Sam, I'm not going to give you an answer because here's the problem. That with somebody like Usman, who has been at the top of the division for so long, you got to give him another top name. And right now, Zan, all the top names at 170 pounds are booked up. You've got, well, first of all, in the UFC rankings, Khamzat Chimaev. I mean, Zan, that would be an interesting fight, but Khamzat Chimaev looks like he's going to go up to middleweight. We even talked about that on the last episode, that Dana's pressuring him to go up to 185 and stay there. So if he's out of the picture, that's one less name. Gilbert Burns, I mean, he's going to be facing George Masvidal in a few weeks. We got to wait for that.
If Gilbert Burns wins, that's a fresh matchup that no one.
Too, yeah.
I mean, and it is Usman Burns too, but in the sense of this new welterweight division, so to speak, with Edwards as the champion, it's a fresher matchup, if you will.
Bilal Muhammad. I mean, we'll talk about we'll talk about him, Zan. I'll bring him back up when we talk about the story itself about what's next for Leon. I think he is one of the most gypped fighters in this division, although there is a rumor that maybe Shavkat might also be involved with him in some way. But other than that, Zan, I mean, Gilbert's booked up. Hamza, we already talked about. I'm purposely not mentioning one name because he's a part of the bigger story. And other than that, I mean, I would say 7 on down, Stan. It takes a really big dip. That Usman is much better than that. Stephen Thompson, Jeff Neal, Sean Brady, Vicente Luque. Like Sean Brady's a name to watch, but like everybody else in that from 7 on down, Usman is too good for at this point. So Usman, unfortunately, Zan, I think what's next right now in the immediately aftermath is the waiting game. You got to wait and see how these all matchups play out.
Yeah, for sure. And you'll probably have to wait for something catastrophic like the welterweight title magically becoming vacant somehow or something like that too.
Yeah, basically. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Zan. There is a name I purposely did not mention on there. And
All I know.
that name is one Colby Chaos. I'm Donald Trump's favorite fighter, Covington. So, Dana White, according to, and this is probably the big story. Like I said, if it wasn't for the boxing fight, this would be the lead. So over the last couple of weeks, Dan, this has been wildfire on social media. In the immediate post-fight press conference at UFC 286, Dana White says Colby Covington will get the first crack at Leon Edwards now that Kamaru Usman is officially out of the picture. And let's say the fan reception to this, Zan, has been polarizing at best and downright, hang on, let me find the sound effect.
What the f? What the f?
Exactly. At the work. Even Leon Edwards himself, Zan, looked over at Dana White and said, so Leon is not happy. Colby's running his mouth and being Colby Covington as usual. Dana's saying, Leon, you gotta fight. Zan, what the hell is this? And what the hell do you make of this?
I mean, what this is they want to make the biggest fights possible, and Colby Covington is a draw. There's no denying that, and I think that's the only. I literally, and I'm not trying to accuse the UFC of doing anything, but I'm just gonna say it how I see it. I literally think they're trying to make this Covington fight to sell pay-per-views because the other elephant in the room that we haven't spoken about just yet is probably not the most marketable potential champion that you could have be the face of your division. I mean, let's be honest. We'll talk about how good of a fighter he is in a second, but I think the UFC is looking at this from a monetary perspective and saying we have this kind of threesome here with Kamaru Usman, who's the former champion, Colby Covington, who's fought for the belt now several times and is going to get a third crack at the belt, and Leon Edwards, and have them all fight one another, as this trio to show how dominant the welterweight division is, to show that there's these three guys and everybody else. What I make of this is I think that it's absurd because there are fighters who are way more deserving than Covington, who's already had his chance at glory to get their own title shot. So I have to say that I side with Leon. If I was Leon, I would be pissed too. And he even said himself at the post-fight press conference, he said, I'm the champion. I should be able to dictate who I fight. And honestly, given what he's been through and given the run that he's been on over the last 7 or 8 years, Rocky is not wrong by any means in claiming any of what he said.
What do you make of his comments? I'm trying to. I'll have to paraphrase it. Basically, talking about how Leon talking about how he was, first and he was forced to sit out because of COVID. Remember, he was supposed to fight Tyron Woodley when we had all the cancellations of all the different UFC cards when 2020 was in its early stages. And then he has the fight with Bilal Muhammad, has the fight with Nate Diaz. And then he basically doesn't fight for a good year. And basically the UFC, where was it? Oh yeah. Actually, I'm skipping a little bit ahead. Towards the end of 2020, basically what happened is the UFC basically removed Leon Edwards from inactivity. It was about 425 days what happened. And Zan, it has been now over 365 days since Colby Covington has competed inside the cage. We last saw him last year in March of 22 facing George Masvidal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's typical, Zan, that we see, some fighters who may not compete for 9 months, 10 months, even sometimes closer to a year, like we have seen, like I just mentioned with Colby. And according to Dana White, which I think might be the difference as to why Colby hasn't been stripped of a ranking or anything, is that according to Dana White, Colby has accepted fights. We've talked, Zan, about a potential Colby Covington versus Gilbert Burns or Colby Covington versus Hamza Chimaev fight for the longest time now. But what do you make of Leon's comment about, like comparing it to when he was inactive for over a year and basically got stripped of his ranking briefly?
You can compare it to that, but I don't think you can in this case, simply because Colby Covington, as I alluded to just a minute ago, Colby Covington is a bigger draw. Colby Covington has headlined now several pay-per-views, whereas Leon Edwards has not. And I think that's where the UFC is coming from a selling point, as wrong as it is rankings wise and numbers wise, and it not being politically correct of number one fighting number two and what have you. I think they're looking at it more from a business perspective than an actual divisional perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you agree, Zan. It's hypocritical. It's hypocritical on the surface, but I mean, it's typical UFC-based hypocritical where all they see, Zan, all they see is, wait a minute, the soundboard's getting a run for its money today. Oh, speaking of money. So that's basically what they see. But Zin, I mean, you are right in that Colby Covington's already had 2 title shots against Usman. Now, maybe, like I said, it goes back to my comments of the division is fresh again. But Zan, I'm going to say it like I just referenced it before. I'm going to say it again, Zan. I think Belal Muhammad, who's currently ranked number 4 in this division, is probably the most gypped fighter here with how, he was Covington was announced as the number 1 contender and all the matchups around him. Because listen to this, Dan. He enters the UFC. He has a bit of a mixed bag to start going into 2019. But then he racks off wins against Curtis Millender, Takashi Sato, Lyman Goodman, Diego Lima. And ever since 2021, Zan, Demian Maia, Stephen Thompson, Vicente Luque, and then beats Sean Brady, who, has, like we mentioned, is a bit of a rising star at welterweight, one of the rising stars at welterweight. Zan, in this stretch of his last 9 fights, Zan, he only didn't win 1 time. And do you know who he was fighting?
Of course.
Leon Rocky Edwards, which was a no contest because of the accidental eye poke.
Yeah, in a fight that should have been run back immediately and never happened. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So if I'm Belal Muhammad, I'm sitting here saying, hey, don't you remember my name?
Hence the nickname, remember the name Belal Muhammad.
Yeah, at this point, that's what he's asking. Like, don't these guys remember my name?
Absolutely. Well, apparently, according to the UFC, they don't, but the MMA community does. So,
according to the UFC, he's going to be paired. I mean, all right, let me bring it up right now. There's a big rumor. You could just play Adele right now. Rumor has it that maybe he's going to fight Shavkat, which would be interesting.
Well, it's very interesting because both of them took pictures with Dana White and shared them to their social medias at very similar times earlier this week. So that could be a stir that an announcement might be brewing for the near future or later on this year that fight could be a possibility.
Yeah, that will be honestly one of the most interesting, it'll be one of the most interesting fights. I do think it is a little bit, sorry about that. I do think it is a little bit jippish though, because it's like if I'm Belal Muhammad, I've raced through competition. I don't know if I want to fight another fellow rising guy in Shavkat. I want to fight, one of the big names like we're talking about with Kamaru and what could be next for him.
This almost seems, I don't know about you, but this rumored fight almost seems like a setup on the UFC's part, because if you notice the promotion with Shavkat, they absolutely love him. They promote him as this guy who's undefeated and all he does is just finish people, and he's super exciting, and it doesn't matter, and he doesn't speak English just because he's such a ferocious competitor in the cage. And with Belal Muhammad, they're just like, yeah, whatever. We're just gonna demote him lower on the card. And this to me seems like they want to see Muhammad get out of there So they want to put him up against another like rising contender who only finishes people, and Shavkat fits that description.
I guess so. Like I guess so.
You
I purposely
you understand my argument though, right?
I understand your argument. I understand your argument, and it's not your argument. It's the UFC's doing, and I don't agree with it. I like Bilal Muhammad. I think he's a great personality, and I think you can market that very well if you so choose to. But no, you go with Shavkat, and don't get me wrong, Shavkat is great, but you can't just completely write off Bilal Muhammad. And Zan, there is a chance, I think, in the next year, Bilal Muhammad, with a win over a guy like a Shavkat or a guy like Kamaru, could force his way into the next title shot after Colby, of course.
Of course, but hey, you never know. Maybe the chips fall where they may, and maybe Covington gets hurt, and maybe the fight that the UFC never wanted to make in the first place actually comes to fruition. But of course, in MMA, it's one of the most unpredictable sports in the world, and you simply don't know. This is one of those cases.
Zen, are you saying that
Sometimes these things happen in MMA?
Exactly. That is 1000% what I'm referring to. So the answer is yes.
okay, fair enough. Yeah. So I understand the reasoning for a Leon Colby fight, but yeah, I kind of think like I don't hate the fight, but I don't think that Colby should be next in line. Especially Zen coming off a win. You know, he hasn't won a year, and his last win was George Masvidal, which Zan, if George Masvidal loses to Gilbert Burns, I mean, there's gonna be no value in him whatsoever.
Hey, but knowing the UFC, they're gonna find some angle to put him in another big fight, even if he loses. I'm gonna make a prediction.
Okay.
You can write this down. Let's see. The date is March 29th. This will be airing. If Conor McGregor and Jorge Masvidal lose their respective fights,
I knew you were going there. I knew it.
That's what they're gonna do, and they're gonna do the one thing that Dana White said he would never do.
You would never do.
Because when has Dana White ever done that before? Like every single freaking weekend, right? What he's
Zen,
I have
new entrance music for Dana White. You know, like how WWE's guys have their entrance music. I think Dana should have some entrance music, or should have entrance music for whenever he enters the post-fight press conference. Let's take a listen.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying? Oh my God! Stop you fucking lying.
That's his anthem every single week, and it never changes. But what I was going to finish with saying was they're going to do Conor McGregor versus Jorge Masvidal. This is assuming that they both lose. Okay, so assuming that they both lose their next fights respectively, they'll do Conor McGregor versus Jorge Masvidal at 170 pounds. And of course, another thing that they would say would be one and done. They're gonna have Jorge Masvidal defend his BMF title just because.
Zen, you and I actually share a crazy mindset because I agree with you. I think Zen, they're gonna if Conor loses to Chandler and Masvidal loses this fight, they're gonna try and do Conor versus Masvidal, and it'll sell, Zen. It will sell, but it's gonna be like 2 or 3 years too late when they should have actually done that fight.
Tom, try like 5 years.
2018? I mean, Conor was still lightweight champion. Conor Khabib was still the fight to make at that point. And Masvidal's star hadn't risen yet, so that's why I'm going with
right.
3.
So maybe it's more like 4 years instead of 5. Yeah. Maybe it's more like 4. Nonetheless, you and I think very much alike. So yeah, you can pencil that in that March 29, 2023, I made the prediction and proclamation, mind you, that if Conor McGregor and Jorge Masvidal lose their respective fights, you will see them compete on a random main event in the UFC 300s or something like that, at T-Mobile Arena, where the rest of the card won't be all that stacked, and it'll just be that one fight that people will care about. So there's that.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, Zan, let's go over to the boxing world. And a very big fight. David Benavidez, Caleb Plant, and Benavidez coming out on top. Zan had a look at the highlights of the fight, and Benavidez and Plant, it definitely delivered. Benavidez, and I think from in the second half of the fight, just really laid into him, and I can't believe Caleb Plant escaped. Seeing the final bell. The way that Benavidez was going, it seemed like Zan that maybe it was on the path that 10th, 11th round you could have called it.
Yeah, with Tony Weeks being as experienced of a referee as he is, I would have thought that he would have been more protective of Caleb Plant, but apparently that was not the case. And although the first 5 rounds were relatively slow, you saw in round 6 that Benavidez realized, okay, I'm making Caleb Plant way too comfortable. I'm going to neutralize him by using my body shots and my uppercuts and my straight jabs to really hurt him and put him in deep waters. And he did that several times. And it goes to show that, no matter how world-class of a fighter that you are, David Benavidez's hand speed is one of the best at 168. And there's no surprise that Caleb Plant had trouble with that, just considering that Caleb Plant, if you watch him closely, he fights on the outside. He was able to do a little bit of work against Canelo Alvarez, but obviously that was not enough either to win a decision. And of course, almost the same identical strategy backfired. So to Benavidez's credit, he beat Caleb Plant doing what David Benavidez does best, and he could have finished him whenever he wanted. But hey, a win is a win, and now he's more than likely going to have to play the waiting game because he's not a mandatory challenger. It's going to be the Canelo Ryder winner, more than likely against Dimitri Bivol. So at this point, David Benavidez is going to have to sit and wait for whoever comes next at 168. Regardless of who that's going to be, though, it is going to be a massive fight whenever that does come to fruition.
For sure. Completely agree with you, Zan. Looking at there's one other fight, Zan, that we had over this past weekend, that being UFC San Antonio. Cory Sandhagen versus Chito Vera, ending in a split decision. And Zan, it was dominant win for Sandhagen, and yet this fight, not even the fact that it was one-sided, just the fight itself just did not inspire me.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I look at that question on our headline, and Sandhagen next at 135, and Zan, this is actually, I got to no. It didn't do enough for me.
Yeah, I can hear what you're saying, but that's why we debate these topics, right? And it's a fair question to ask given where he is in the division, but I totally understand your sentiment there. I gotta say, Texas is gonna Texas. I mean, they almost scared us with the decision there. That one judge who scored it for Chito Vera should probably never judge another high-profile MMA fight again, let alone another fight again. Because if you watch that fight, there's no way you can tell me that fight was not 4-1 or 5-0. There's no way it was 3-2. There's no way it was 3-2. You can't.
There is a SpongeBob clip that perfectly goes with this, where SpongeBob is looking at Patrick and saying, "Hey Patrick, what am I? Stupid? No, I'm Texas. What's the difference?"
Yeah, that is an iconic SpongeBob clip. That is for damn sure. That would sum up how the decision was and how the fight went, because it was not the fight that people were anticipating. You have Cory Sandhagen, who is a nasty striker, and you have Marlon Vera, who can do everything and is also a really solid grappler. So you thought that the styles would contrast, and Sandhagen did try to use his patented flying knee, but it did not work in this fight. And truly, this is a fight where you couldn't wait for it to be over. And I think it just goes to show that sometimes bantamweight can get on your nerves, and this fight really did do that. And now it's going to be interesting to see what the UFC does, given that Cejudo and Sterling are going to fight. These two are still definitely in the mix, and then of course you have Sean O'Malley, which I don't know if you saw, but MMA Mania decided to do a little bit of a fun piece, even though it was not taken as such. They were doing it as satire that Sean O'Malley is technically now undefeated, even though obviously according to the record books that is no longer and has never been true. But I will say that this fight not going well did help Sean O'Malley's case, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, for an upcoming title shot in the near future.
No, absolutely. Because if Marlon Chito Vera had won this fight, then you could have argued, okay, while this bantamweight title picture plays itself out, you could run Sean O'Malley versus Chito Vera back. However, Sandhagen now bringing himself up to number 3. I mean, you could run O'Malley Sandhagen again, but Zan, none of that's going to happen because I've said it on this show, Zan. I said it last week, 2 weeks ago, whatever, that O'Malley is one of the golden children of the UFC. And so the first opportunity, they're purposely waiting him out because the first opportunity they get, Zan, they're going to give O'Malley the title shot. But let's be real, Zan. About that question, who's next at 135? There is one clear answer of who it should be next at 135. The problem is, as we discussed last episode, he's not going to take it. And that's Merab Dvalishvili. But no, I gotta, I gotta play bodyguards. I gotta do, the WWE style thing where Aljamain Sterling is the heel champion and I'm going to be the stablemate, the heavy, and I'm going to go do the dirty business to prevent anybody else from getting the title.
Yeah.
It kind of sounds really screwed up. Sorry, Zan. It just really sounds kind of screwed up. But for the bantamweight picture to actually get some legitimate movement, it's scary to think that maybe somebody you might have to root for Henry Cejudo to actually win in May.
Yeah, but even if Sterling wins, though, I mean, you could do Sterling versus Sandhagen too. But let's be honest, who really wants to see that, right?
No, and of course, and UFC's not going to do that if O'Malley is available.
Exactly.
So
therefore, those two things cancel each other out.
Exactly. So let's put it this way, San. The division, the bantamweight division in mixed martial arts is fantastic. All the talent there, whether UFC, Bellator, one championship, it's fantastic. Unfortunately, like you mentioned, Zan, this is where the division frustrates you, particularly the UFC's bantamweight division gets absolutely frustrating. And as I was going to say, UFC gonna UFC.
So hang on. So let's play matchmaker for a second. So if you're Mick Maynard and Sean Shelby, what do you do with Cory Sandhagen?
Well, I mean, do you throw him to Merab if Sterling beats Cejudo in May?
I think you have to, and you might have to put an interim tag on it. It's just because the UFC is going to UFC, right?
UFC gonna UFC, yes. As far as Chito Vera goes, I mean, that's an interesting one. I mean, immediately, so he fell to number 5, which means here are the 5 guys who follow him, Zan. Rob Font, Dominic Cruz, Yadong Song, Pedro Munoz, Ricky Simone. And then you got Umar Nurmagomedov waiting in the wings, and if he wins his next fight, he's definitely getting into the top 10.
I mean, the only fight that makes sense for Chito Vera is Rob Font, right?
Yeah, I was looking at that 5-6 Marlon Vera, Rob Font. It would have to be
because none of those other fighters are even on the same caliber as and you and I both know that better than anyone.
I agree with you. We're kind of, maybe say we are Mick Bader and Sean Shelby in disguise because we basically agreed with both of those things of what to do next for both of them.
Okay, so there you have it. If either of you two are watching this, that's what we are highly encouraging you to do.
Also,
pretty much what we're saying is don't pull any shenanigans that me nor Tom would or would not approve of, or
Did
would
you
not
say?
approve of.
Oh, Sam, did you say shenanigans? You think the UFC and shenanigans are a thing?
Yeah, I
All
do.
right. Where do we want to go from here? Do we want to do the previews right now, Sam, or do we want to go to the news pieces first?
Let's go to the news first.
Okay, let's start then, Sand. I think you only chose that because you couldn't wait to talk about Chicago again.
Oh, I can't wait. So I'm sitting at my desk. And I get this email from good old Bellator PR. Danny Brenner sends me this email in all caps telling me that Bellator 297 will be taking place in my city, Chicago, Illinois, June 16th, with the biggest card of the entire year so far. We have former UFC middleweight title challenger Yoel Romero looking to dethrone Vadim Nemkov for the light heavyweight championship. Lucky enough for me, I'll get to see back-to-back Vadim Nemkov fights. I can hardly wait. And then, of course, Patricio Pitbull looks to make rare MMA history when he goes for not one, not two, but his third division title of his career against Sergio Pettis. You want to talk about Bellator 297 being a megastar card? It is slowly but surely shaping up to be. So if you haven't gotten on the pre-sale list yet, do it now, because this is a cannot miss Bellator event. And honestly, as much as people like to harp on Bellator, this is actually a card that people will care about, especially that Pitbull versus Pettis fight, because that is high-level stuff. Of course, we'll get to the whole tournament controversy in a second, but yes, Bellator 297, June 16th, Wintrust Arena, Showtime. I'll be there. I can hardly wait. It is going to be one of the best MMA cards of the year, UFC or not, without a doubt.
Speaking of UFCs, and June 16th is a Friday. That means less likely of a chance that Bellator is going to have any competition. It might have the floor that day,
which is better than having several conflicts. Where the only thing they might have is the Stanley Cup final that night, but outside of that, based on where that series is, they could be sitting pretty that night. You never know.
Yeah, I might have to do split screens if the Rangers make it to the Stanley Cup that night.
That is exactly right.
But yeah, Romero versus Vadim Nemkov. Well, Zan, when we were talking about what's next for Ryan Bader, what could be next with that heavyweight title picture, we brought up Vadim Nemkov. We were talking about what could be next for him, and here it is, that long-awaited fight between Romero and Nemkov. We kind of expected it to happen. For you, Zan, I mean, it's a bonus that it gets to happen in Chicago, especially after 5 years ago, Zan. I think you were there for UFC 225, that second Romero versus Robert Whittaker fight.
I sure was lucky enough to be there. This will be my second time watching Yoel Romero compete, and as far as I can remember, this is the first time. I know this is a very weird tidbit, but I have to bring it up. This is the first time that Bellator has ever come to Chicago. In June, so I'm very excited that it's right at the heart of the summer instead of March or April or November.
Technically, Sam, it's not even summer; it's still a few days away from the summer.
That's you're not wrong. If you want to be exactly factually correct, we're gonna be about 5 days away from the start of summer. But I guess you could say it is a good way to kick off the start of summer, if you will.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you,
No, that's true. But I gotta say, a part of my heart makes me upset because Bellator is going to Chicago before the UFC. I thought when this whole COVID thing was gonna wrap up that it was gonna be the opposite. So, which means we'll have to wait for the UFC to return to Chicago for a little while longer.
But Zan, the Apex. You can't forget about the Apex.
I hope that was sarcasm.
You can't tell?
No, of course. I was going to say, if you're serious, there's not much I can really do through the screen, but I can say that if you were actually serious, I would be very, very disappointed. Very disappointed.
You would try to reach through the screen and purposely, wrap your hand around my neck.
That's exactly right. By the way, if you did actually believe the Apex theory, then you're playing into the so-called Zuffa myth. Just so you know.
Those who believe in the Apex theory are also those who have Dana White privilege.
Very, very well said. Very, very well said. Which also means no. You know what else? You know what else this means too? With Bellator 297 taking place in June, if all goes well, I am hopeful that they will not only have one event in Chicago but two, because they can keep the same theme going by having one of the Bellator 300 post 300 events in Chicago in November. And I really hope that if all goes according to plan, we're going to get to it later. I hope that that the winner of that Daniel James Marcel Gome fight could very well be added to this card to make it a super card and have 3 title fights instead of just 2. So you never know.
That'd be really cool. That'd honestly be really cool. So, and Zan, that means we're going to have live coverage for Gamebred this month. We're going to have live coverage for Bellator in June. Maybe we'll have live coverage for Bellator, like you said, Zan, that they come back for 300-something come the fall. Like, there's going to be a lot coming here with MMA Outsiders. And Bellator is, Bellator seems to be king when it comes to us doing coverage for stuff.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we'll get to hopefully I'll get to a UFC event in the near future. That is another goal on the bucket list. But yes, if you want extensive, unrivaled, can't find access anywhere else for Bellator, you have come to the right place.
Let's talk about Zan though. On a negative, the controversy here. So Patricio Pitbull, I mean Zan, it's fantastic. He's going for a title in a 3rd weight class. That's not something, Zan, that has even been done in the UFC. And he'll have the opportunity to do that against Sergio Pettis. But, if you are Rafian Stotts or you're Apache Mix, I'll even say, Zan, especially the latter, because Rafian Stotts and Sergio Pettis are boys, so maybe not so much there, but if you're Apache Mix especially, you must feel gypped. Here you are. You're in the finals of the Bantamweight Grand Prix. Remember is still going on, even though it's for an interim championship, and Sergio Pettis is not involved in that tournament. But you're in that tournament. You're going to go for $1 million, and you're going to get that championship. But instead of Sergio Pettis at the end of the rainbow, Zan, no. Now there's a chance, and in an early prediction, Zan, of this Pitbull Pettis matchup, I'd say a very good chance that instead of Sergio Pettis awaiting you, no, it's Patricio Pitbull awaiting you.
Yeah, very well said. I mean, there's not much more I can say, but what I can say is that more parity in the division, better for business. So if you look at it from a financial perspective, you can build the Pitbull Pettis fight, and then of course when Rafian Stotts is ready to go, you can build him, given that he just beat Danny Sabatello last year. And I think it just goes to show that that's one of the most exciting divisions in not just Bellator but all of MMA. And I think it goes to show the level of high quality talent. So even though those two guys in reality got gypped because of the tournament, I think you're going to get to see some fights that maybe you wouldn't have gotten to see a little bit earlier than expected. So actually, looking at it from a positive standpoint, it could be a win-win for everyone.
Well, that part of that was going to lead to a question of, is the positive that maybe Patricio Pitbull is a more interesting matchup that for, like Patricio Pitbull versus Patchy Mix is a more interesting matchup than Sergio Pettis versus Patchy Mix, I guess, because of Pitbull's standing in Bellator.
I would think so. Oh, and just given his bigger stature in MMA, period. Yeah.
Fair enough. And maybe, Zan, maybe it'll also clear things up if Rafian Stotts beats Patchy Mix and Pettis loses the title, because then the teammates don't have to fight one another. Although those two would be very willing, it seems, to fight one another, unlike another certain pair, Sterling Marab.
Very, very well said. Now, I have to ask you before we remove ourselves from this topic, which organization's bantamweight division are you most looking forward to for the remainder of the year? Is it the UFC's bantamweight division or is it Bellator's bantamweight?
Bellator. I think this is actually a rare time, Zan, and I'm going to go with Bellator because Bellator has some fantastic bantamweights. The UFC does too, but Zan, as we kind of alluded to before, their championship situation is a little fucky. And that's not to say that you can apply the same thing with this kind of matchup, Sam, with Patricio Pitbull versus Pettis taking place while we're still waiting for the final of the Bantamweight Grand Prix. However, Zan, I mean, this is, one matchup, and as we kind of alluded to, Patricio Pitbull, a much more interesting and maybe valuable name when you look at the bigger picture. So, because now Pitbull, Zan, just adds to the loaded talent in that weight class.
Very, very well said. And to wrap this up, I got to give a little shout out to Bellator. People do kind of rip the idea of tournaments, but this is a case where now you can even build a bigger tournament based on what happens with the Pitbull Pettis fight and make a totally another revamped bantamweight tournament that could even be bigger than the previous one that they had. You never know.
For sure. Part of one of our next news items, Dan, is going to involve a little video, so I'm going to wait on that one so I can try and get that up. So we're going to move to something else, Dan. We have a fourth person for the UFC Hall of Fame class of 2023, and Zan. Oh my God, this class is loaded. You had Jose Aldo, you have Anderson Silva, Jens Pulver, and now, as announced at UFC San Antonio in his home state of Texas, Donald Cowboy Cerrone.
Yeah, what makes this even cooler is that Cowboy Cerrone had no idea that his family was flying out to be a part of this, nor did he even know he was going to be shown on the big screen. So first off, shout out to Cowboy Cerrone for being the bonus king. Shout out to Cowboy Cerrone for being willing to literally fight anyone, anywhere, anytime, any place. And I mean, literally, you have to give him all the credit in the world. I was lucky enough to be at his fight. I believe when he fought, I think it would have been Tony Ferguson. Unfortunately, he lost that fight. From what I can remember, correct, where he blew his nose when he wasn't supposed to. I was there. That's the one time I've seen Cerrone in person, but nonetheless, phenomenal career. One of the best UFC fighters to ever hold a title. Is in that same discussion with Uriah Faber as one of the best UFC male fighters to never hold a championship, and is someone that is a fan favorite, kind of did whatever he wanted, did it in his own unique way, and is someone that has a lot of legendary fights, a lot of legendary rivalries to look back on, especially his years with Benson Henderson in the WEC. That's well documented. Overall, a very successful career for Cowboy. Fought all the best in the world, got his huge payday against Conor McGregor, walked away on his own terms, and you got to give him all the respect in the world because he gave it his all every single time he fought, and was just one of those true ambassadors for the lighter weight divisions, and is someone that will be celebrated immensely in Las Vegas the weekend of UFC 290, especially at the Hall of Fame induction on Thursday.
And I'll say this, Dan. One of the things you said, like one of the best fighters to never win a championship. I'm not even going to say one of, Zan. I think he is the best fighter to never win a championship. I think, and you think that maybe he could have gotten more title shots than he actually did. But, it goes to show you, Zan, that only select few people ever get to the top. But Cowboy, like you mentioned, the one thing I'll remember him for is the fact that he was the all-time wins leader and finished as leader in the UFC when he had that crowning achievement when he fought Mike Perry at the UFC's 25th anniversary fight night. And the fact that, that little surge between 2018 and 19, that little last surge of victories Also, when I fell in love with Cowboy Cerrone Zain, he beats I think it was Eddie Alvarez, and then he has the quick turnaround. Or no, it was Miles Jury, and then he fought Benson Henderson. His fight with Eddie Alvarez, basically was fantastic. I think that was Eddie Alvarez's UFC debut coming over from Bellator. Uh, Fantastic career for Cowboy. The wins, the finishes, the post-fight bonus, and Zain. I mean, you talk about him being celebrated on that Thursday at the International Fight Week. Zain, this is combine this UFC Hall of Fame class, Zain, combined with whoever else could be a part of this class, combine that with the potentially loaded card that could be headlined by Jones Stipe. Like, this might be a heavily anticipated UFC International Fight Week, and one of
Yeah.
probably highly anticipated in a while.
Oh, I mean, you could argue, Tom, this is up there with the first. No, I was going to say you could argue that this is up there with the UFC 100 Fan Expo. This is it literally feels that big. This is a UFC 100 level of excitement, and that it feels like if we think who's going to compete on the card is actually going to compete, it is going to be a very star-studded weekend.
Yeah, absolutely agree. All right. Let me try to share my screen, Zain, because I need to showcase this, because I'm sure there are people out there that are going, who the hell is Frank Collazo and what the hell is Fury FC? So we made mention, Zain, that Texas is going to Texas. And there was just some really ugly controversy when it came to this fight here. So let me bring this up. So this is a fight at Fury FC. Come on, screen. There you go. This is a fight at Fury FC. It's between Gianni Vasquez and Chires. And Gianni Vasquez ends up losing this fight. He gets choked unconscious. He's out for quite a while, Zain. 30 seconds is quite a while, and the referee does nothing. And then he goes into an arm bar, and he suffers an arm dislocation. Let me play the footage.
Legs back in front of him, puts him back in guard. Here we go. Here's the triangle. He's got to figure for it. This is it.
Look at that, Zain. I mean, that is a very tight triangle choke. He's got, as the commentators say, he's got a figure four locked in. And at this point, it looks like he's out. And the referee is Frank Collazo, is just standing there, doing nothing. Not even checking on the. Okay, now he's checking, like, do something here. And then he goes into an arm bar, and the arm is basically suffering a dislocation, and he's not doing anything. Look at this. Look at this. Jeez. I mean, Zain, how do we answer for this?
Yeah, first off, my heart goes out to Yanni, and we hope that he's okay, because that looked like a very brutal sequence, number one. Number two, I just want to make mention of the fact that at 3:34 of round 3 of this fight, it's clear as day. You can't even speculate, because you can see it for yourself, and you probably agree that this timestamp is 100% accurate. At 3:34 of the round, he's clearly out. There's no justification the other way for that. That's number one. Number two, it goes to show the lack of education at the smaller level of these regional promotions. Mind you, Fury FC is a UFC Fight Pass promotion. This is also a promotion that has had several Dana White Contender Series fighters compete there before making their way to the UFC. And this is also another promotion that Dana White heavily supports and goes to several other shows a year to find talent. So if you factor all of those three things in, this was a colossal disaster, not only for Fury FC, but for the Texas State Athletic Commission, who in 2023 should know better, considering that they have events like this in Texas, apparently, according to some very smart MMA Twitter people who mutually follow both of us, apparently there are issues like this that happen every weekend. It just happened to be that this one was publicized because it was seen by such a wider audience. So unfortunately for everyone involved, a really bad situation. And for Colazo, a situation that A, he shouldn't have allowed to happen, and B, needs to be a learning experience for him and all the referees before him and after him, because stuff like this at the regional pro or whatever level you want cannot be happening in 2023 in MMA. And that was the huge controversy there. We talk about protecting a fighter and athlete safety and stuff. None of that was followed here. And I think a lot of people are going to have a lot of things to say. Saying that it's being investigated and whatever isn't good enough. There needs to be actual change, and it needs to be nipped in the bud, because you can't have inexperienced referees. Roughing, I understand starting somewhere, but not on Fury FC. That's going to be seen by thousands of people on UFC Fight Pass. I'm not saying wrong place, wrong time, but what I am saying is Frank Colazo needs to be held accountable, and it was just overall a really bad situation.
Yeah, and I mean, learning experience, Zan, I think for the kind of violation that he did, Zan, just the fact that doing nothing and doing very little checking of the man before he goes out, stays out, then enters basically an armbar and suffers injuries in this fight. Zan, I don't think Frank Colazo should be refereeing for a little while. I think he needs to basically relearn everything, basically go back to referee school and relearn everything, because that is something that just cannot happen on any level. We try to promote this.
Yeah, I mean, back to what I was saying. It needs to be a learning experience for him in the sense that he should not be refereeing for a while, and if he really wants to be a part of the sport, he needs to learn that fighter safety is number one. And if you're a referee in that position on a high profile regional show that's on Fight Pass, and you don't know the guy's out, that's on you to know that the guy is out. And it's obvious he did not have any awareness, or may have not known that you have to know when those things happen. It's not always about the tap. And I actually think he was waiting for. Yeah.
No, because then we talk about promoting safety in the sport. That although we have, MMA has its violent roots and blah blah blah. We talk about that this is a sport where we're looking after the fighter's own safety, and we're looking at the fighter's own. Like you have to know when a fighter is being too tough for their own good, or they can't defend themselves. They won't defend themselves. They'll put themselves, like they'd rather go out in a submission hold, or they just go out, suddenly while trying to fight. Like, all of that is necessary for being a referee. And Zan, it's bad on Frank Colazo. It's just also bad, Zan, on the entire athletic commission, because, I'll be fair. My state, New York, gets ripped every time, because every time the UFC or somebody goes to New York, there's always a problem. But Zan, oh man, I think Texas is above and away the state that has the most controversy when it seems when it comes to referees and judges and all of that. Because, oh my God, it's just, and I'm not going to count Nevada in this, because Nevada, more MMA events are held in Nevada because of the UFC being its headquarters. Like I'm not even going to count there. Just Texas though. I mean, it's bad. And you're right, Zan. I mean, being investigated. So basically, in a good month or so, we're not going to hear anything more of this.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate. And credit goes to Alex Behunin of Cage Side Press and everyone who was sharing the video to spread awareness that things like this shouldn't happen. Even I shared it and said my take on it. You can go on my Twitter and find it. I was very blunt, and I said it is literally the worst stoppage I have ever seen. And this is coming from someone who's watched MMA for a decade plus, and I've never seen that egregious of a officiating job in my life at any level of the sport. That has to be the top of the list, and it's a very unfortunate list because things like that shouldn't happen. So really, in all honesty, was it a good win for Shiraz? Yeah, but it was very unfortunate that he won in the way that he did, and for Yanni, just absolutely devastating considering how close that fight was. Knowing that if he probably doesn't get caught in that submission, he more than likely wins that fight. And we're talking about a totally different story. We may not even be talking about this period, but I do think though, in any regard, like you said, this won't be heard from unless we keep speaking out about it. And I'm glad that we shed light on it because it was just a really bad MMA blunder this weekend that caught the internet by surprise. And Dana White said it best: if you don't know that the guy's out, you probably shouldn't be a referee in this sport, and he is not wrong about that. So,
And actually, Zan, I'm not done because Fury FC ends up releasing a statement. And here's what their statement. It is the referee's job to protect the fighter when the fighter cannot protect him or herself. In last night's main event, the referee failed to do this. While the job of the referee is one of the hardest to do in the sport, the need for proper and continued training would help to alleviate things like this incident. We do not hire, train, or select refs for our shows, but we would be more than willing to lead a revamp and overhaul of the reffing and judging selection and training process. What do you make of this statement?
I think it's good because they're the first promotion to say, if you give us the resources and the time, we will help you. And when have you seen a promotion go out and actively put out a press release saying, "Hey, we understand that this happened. We're willing to help you if you're willing to work with us on it." This is a first for me that I've seen. I don't know about you, but I thought it was very good on Fury FC to say something, because if they were to stay silent on it, I think it shows more about them as a promotion than anything else. And thankfully, they were not silent.
And honestly, Zan, like I'm just trying to see. No. Like I'm trying to have a look at some of the feedbacks, and like I have I'm looking at Jason Halgolm, and I'm looking at when he posted it and some of the comments that are under there in Twitter. Basically, that everyone is kind of saying that this is just them saying that there's nothing that they can do, and they actually feel like it's kind of gross that they came out and said something like this. Now, I agree that they're, the fact that they're saying they're more than willing to lead a revamp is great, but
Yeah,
but there also needs to be actual action on it. Like there needs to
no,
actually
100%. But as we both know, if the promotions don't, the promotions can advocate as much as they want, but with how the sport is structured and with the athletic commissions hiring the referees and judges, there's only so much they can do. My point in saying all that is, if Fury FC is coming out and saying, "Hey, if you are willing to say yes to us, that we will work collectively as a partnership in fixing some of these issues," I don't see how that is considered a negative connotation, if you will.
Which, by the way, I think actually there are plenty of people out there who don't realize the promotions don't really have any say when it comes
No, they
to
don't.
who's gonna be the judge, who's gonna be the referee. I mean, you have certain, like maybe Dana has a little leeway to keep the likes of Steve Mazzagatti and Mario Yamasaki out of the cage, but ultimately it's the commissions who have the final say. Which brings up one last point. Which brings up one last question, San. One question that I got looking at the replies of those who basically asked that: do you think maybe the state commissions control a little too much when it comes? In other words, like with the judges, and should promotions have a little more say?
I think so. I mean, Fury FC is at a level now where they are seen by thousands upon thousands on Fight Pass every several weeks. There's no reason why the UFC or another one of these partners could step in and say, "Hey, we're trying to build the next crop of talent. Why don't we help you guys in making your promotion as safe and equitable as possible so issues like that don't happen?" So, yeah, I do think promotions should have a little say when it comes to helping out their feeder counterparts, if you will. Yeah, I do.
All right, fair enough. All right, San. Last segments here. Let's run down some previews. So we've got a Bellator this weekend. We got a PFL this weekend, the premiere of the 2023 PFL season, and you're going to Gamebred Boxing 4. So let's run through those quick, San. let's start with Bellator, the big one, the main event. Marcelo Golm taking on Daniel James. You got to talk to Daniel James. Zain, after having your conversation with Daniel James, which you can, by the way, check out here on the Under the Bench podcast network, what did you think, Zain, of his comments, and what do you think of his mindset as he prepares for Marcelo Golm, and how does this fight ultimately play out?
Yeah, I mean, first off, an outstanding conversation. Would highly recommend checking it out. As I alluded to earlier, this will be in written form on BJPen.com later this week ahead of the fight. That way you guys can check it out in written form if you want to just skim through the interview, whatever you guys want to do. First off, very gracious with his time. I think he's 100% ready for this fight. He's been super focused in camp. He's restructured his diet completely. Doesn't feel as heavier or as bloated as he once did earlier in his career. And really, I just think his mind is taking it with the time and seizing the opportunity of a heavyweight title shot. When he sees one, he knows that Marcelo Golm is the guy that he needs to get through to move one step closer. And although Marcelo Golm has UFC experience, whereas Daniel James doesn't, I don't think that plays a factor at all. I think this Daniel James train, if you will, is only getting faster and faster. And I think beating a guy like Tyrell Fortune to get yourself into the rankings and now fighting a guy who's had a pretty solid last couple of years of his own career, I think it makes for a very high-level fight. And Marcelo Golm, from my understanding, has never been in a 5-round fight, so Daniel James is willing to take this fight for as long as it needs to get to. No matter if it's just taking it into deep waters or finishing the fight late. He thinks that he's better than him everywhere, and truly, after watching Golm's performances and the guys that he's beat compared to James, I think that Daniel James's resume is a little bit better, and I think he comes out on top. I'm gonna agree with him when he says that he's gonna knock him out in the first round. I also think he'll knock him out in the first round too, and I think it'll only take him 2 minutes to do it.
Oh my God, that is a take. I like that. So
Yeah.
we've got, I think this is number what? 4. This is number 4 versus number 5, or number 5 versus number 6 in this.
I think it's 5. It's number 5 versus number 6, from what I remember.
All right, and Marcelo Golm, Zain, has had some is on a finishing streak of his own. He actually has 2 first round finishes in his last 4 fights. This is his 3rd fight in Bellator, of course, beating Billy Swanson, beating Davion Franklin. He's never
gone the distance either.
Yeah, he has never gone the distance, and I believe Daniel James has gone the distance before. So
I believe so too.
So Zain, I actually think this is going to be a case where, I mean, do I see this fight ending in a finish with these two? You're damn right, I see it ending in a finish. But I'm just going to take a note, Zain, that I think in that case, I think I'm going to go along with the MMA math. I think the longer that this fight plays out actually benefits Daniel James more, especially, Zain, when you consider, what he had told you about him slimming down and basically not feeling as bloated. I think that just plays into DJ's path to victory more if this fight goes longer.
I agree, and also surviving the early storm against Tyrell Fortune, where he nearly lost in the first round, I think goes to show that he can hold his own with the division's upper echelon. So I do think if he gets caught by Golm in any way, Daniel James will be ready to weather the storm again and make the fight a dirty brawl, which is what he's probably expecting and could very well happen, and no question about it.
So I'm going to agree with you, Zain, on a finish for Daniel James. I'm going to say second round, though. I think Marcelo Golm has it in him a bit to weather the storm for the first round, let alone the first couple of minutes.
Okay, sounds good to me. I could live with that. This is a fight that he's been super excited about. He's been actively promoting it all week across all of his social medias. If you've been on Daniel James's Instagram or Twitter account the last 4 weeks, the only content you'll see is him promoting his fight So if you don't know that Daniel James is fighting on Friday, you definitely know now because it's literally been everywhere across the entire MMA sphere, and without a doubt, it is more than likely the biggest fight of the weekend. But we do have other fights to talk about also coming up this weekend. We have the first ever PFL of the year, and it is capped off by two, one former UFC title challenger and another one that arguably could still be in the UFC rankings had it not been for a decision by Dana White several years ago. We have Brendan Longname, mind you, versus Marlon Moraes. Tom, this is a very high level fight. I think it's going to start out with the bang, if you will, and this is the perfect fight to do it. What do you think of this matchup?
I mean, also, Zan, bear in mind that Brendan Longname is also the defending PFL featherweight champion. He ended up winning the tournament last year. So
very well true, which he promised everyone that he would, including Dana White, and he did it.
Yeah. And Zan, I think this is going to be a very high level fight. I think this is going to be an entertaining fight. The problem, Zan, do you think that this is a must-win fight for Marlon Moraes? Because even if he wins his second fight, Zan, and enters the PFL playoffs, I think he's going to have trouble. I mean, considering the fact, Zan, that he is now, let's say 5-6, so he's lost 6 of his last 7 fights. Things have not been the same for Marlon Moraes since he lost to Henry Cejudo when he was fighting for the vacant bantamweight title. And his PFL debut, and he competed on that PFL pay-per-view card. Well, I don't believe it was the pay-per-view. I think it was before it. But he ended up, it was Moraes versus Moraes. He took on Shaman Moraes for the second time. And Shaman Moraes basically blew the brakes off him in the 3rd round to get a finish. So,
he sure did.
Do you think this is must-win? Because I think so.
Oh yeah. I mean 1,000%. And I actually do think he gets it done. I do.
Really? Does he finish Brendan Longname, or is he getting a decision?
No, he's gonna get a decision, but I think it's gonna be one of those cases where he gets a decision, but even if he wins and someone gets hurt, Longname would still have a chance to compete later this year. It's gonna be one of those scenarios where he won't be totally out of the woods as yet, because we're obviously still at the regular season stages. So you never know. You could see these guys fight maybe twice. You never know.
It's possible. I'm gonna agree with you on decision. I'm gonna go the other way. I'm gonna go with Longname gets it done. This is a prove me fight. Prove me that you still have it, Marlon. Because I need to see something from him.
Okay.
Also, we do have so it's not just the featherweights in action on the first PFL card this season. We've also got the light heavyweights. And you got Rob Wilkinson, the defending PFL light heavyweight champion, taking on Zan, another name that has come over to the PFL from the UFC, in Thiago Santos.
Yeah, I gotta go with the UFC veteran here. Well, I guess Rob Wilkinson is a UFC veteran himself, but I am gonna take Thiago Santos in this fight. How about you?
Again, this is another one of those situations, Zan, where I question if Thiago Santos, if this is a must-win fight for him, because the end of his UFC run wasn't exactly great, and he is also coming off, Zan, 5 losses in his last 6 fights. His only win between 2019 and 2022 was the win against Johnny Walker. Now, you can also say John Jones, Glover Teixeira, Alexander Rakic, Magomed Ankalaev, Jamal Hill. Those are all reputable names for him to have losses to. Zan, however, this is the PFL, and in the PFL, Zan, very weird, what happens. So I'm getting Zan the bad feeling that, I can't say a bad feeling, the feeling that some really weird crap is going to happen, and I'm going to go with Wilkinson on this one.
Really?
Yeah. I just got this weird, Zan, it's the PFL. How many times have we seen upsets in this promotion? I think the PFL, Zan, is much harder to predict than the UFC and Bellator, to be honest with you.
I would agree.
All right. Zan, let's get to the fun stuff, though. You're going to Gamebred Boxing, and they're presenting some very interesting matchups. Starting with its main event of Showtime Anthony Pettis taking on the former lightweight champion of the world, Roy Jones Jr.
I'm just gonna say this. If I drive all the way to Milwaukee, and this is a big old April Fool's joke, I'm gonna be very, 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 very angry.
Wait. Zan, what do you think if you drive all the way up to Milwaukee and it's an April Fool's joke? What do you think is going to await you? What is the April Fool's joke? Is it going to be Dana White popping out of the stage for some reason? Surprise! Is it going to be Conor McGregor slowly rising up from the ring and saying, "Give me all your money"?
Well, who knows? Maybe it could be Jorge Masvidal jumping in and doing a tag team match against someone I've never heard.
It's gonna be no. It's gonna be Jorge Masvidal. Then you're gonna hear Hulk Hogan's music, and it's gonna be somebody dressed up like Colby Covington. Like it's gonna be a mock Colby Covington, and Masvidal's just gonna beat him up in the ring for a whole hour.
Yeah, that would be the most viral video in the history of MMA viral videos. But in all seriousness, again, super grateful that I'm going to be able to be there to cover this event. It should be absolute spectacle. I gotta admit, I don't have enough in-person MMA media experience, but to say that I'm going to a spectacle as crazy as this, I'm very much looking forward to it. Let's face it, Roy Jones Jr. is very, very old. He has not competed at this level in nearly 3 decades. I really don't know what to expect, but just on the sheer fact that Anthony Pettis has 0 boxing experience, I'm going to go Roy Jones Jr. to win the fight in an 8-round decision. That's my prediction.
Yeah. Zan, you pretty much summed up my thoughts. As much as Roy Jones Jr. is old, he has the boxing experience. Now, he's not going to finish Anthony Pettis. No way. This is not a fight, Zan, that is going to end in a spectacular knockout. This is going to be one of those fights, Zan, that's going to be, it's going to go to the decision. And either Roy Jones Jr.'s hand is going to get raised or it's going to be a draw.
Imagine if somehow, some way, after this episode airs, the fight gets canceled.
I will take this computer and I will just shout into the microphone about how much of this show is now wasted. I mean, it's at the end of the show. I can't even complain.
Right.
You're gonna say, oh, wait a minute. So it was an April Fool's joke all along. It just didn't happen on April 1st.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, Roy Jones Jr. by decision. Anthony Pettis will show out for the Milwaukee crowd. He'll try to do some crazy stuff, I'm sure. But Roy Jones Jr. will 1,000% win.
Worst comes to worst, Zan. If this card gets canceled, just pop in and load up UFC 4. Make Roy Jones Jr. in there, and then I'm sure you can have the others. Or if they're not in UFC 4, probably in UFC 3. Then you could just play the matchups on there. I think UFC 3 and 4 have striking only modes.
No, yeah, I'm very much aware. More than likely, UFC 3 would be the better option between the two games. If we're talking about UFC Undisputed 3, because I was going to say EA Sports,
the most legendary game of all time.
No, it's true, but I was going to say EA Sports UFC 3, from what I understand, does not have an all striking mode, but I believe the THQ version does. So you never know. Or I could create a character for Roy Jones Jr. and just make his boxing 100%. So,
or you don't even have to do it in a UFC game. Just make them in WWE games. And WWE 2K23 just came out. You just have to do a wrestling match instead of a pro wrestling match instead of an MMA or a boxing fight, whatever.
You're giving me some very unique ideas, but let's hope I don't have to implement any of them.
Yeah, but not. Co-main event: Vitor Belfort versus Ronaldo Jacare Souza.
Well, my first question about this fight is, Is it 2013? Because I feel like this fight's happening about a decade too late.
No, man, it's 2010. It's even been longer.
No kidding. Unfortunately, this is the non-TRT version of Vitor Belfort, so I'm actually going to pick Jacare Souza to win by knockout.
I'm gonna go with Jacare. I think this one ends in decision too. I love you just picked against Vitor due to lack of TRT.
I had to do it. I just had to do it.
I'm gonna go Jacare as well. I'm gonna go Jacare by decision. However, leads us then to the remaining two big names on here. Hey, Jose Aldo, Jeremy Stephens. What?
The people's main event, in my opinion.
Jose Aldo, Jeremy Stephens, Zain. Hey, we saw them fight in the UFC about 5 years ago. They were a fight night headliner in like 2018.
They sure were. I like Jose Aldo with his quick hand speed to beat Whittle even by decision, but it will be a very entertaining fight. What do you think?
Yeah, I Stephens, even in the PFL, struggled. Aldo, despite his age, Zain is still showing that he can still compete and hang with the best of them. So I'm going to go with Aldo by decision on this one. He's going to be simply too much for Stephens again.
We don't have a graphic for it, but it also marks the return, I guess you could say. Pearl Gonzalez is also in this card, believe it or not.
Yeah. So you got a lot going on at Gamebred Boxing 4, and Bando here will be following all the action there. So make sure to follow him at Bando99 and make sure to follow us at MMA Outsiders ETV for some interesting coverage of this show on social media.
Yeah, the first fight is at 5:30 Central. So for those of you who want to watch the entire card, that is when the card officially begins. So be sure to tune in there. There are still tickets left on Ticketmaster, but they are going pretty fast. For those of you who don't know, it is available for UFC Fight Pass subscribers over there as well. It should be a very interesting show from Milwaukee. It's their first big boxing event in almost 25 to 30 years. So it should be a very interesting atmosphere at the home of the Milwaukee Bucks, the Pfizer Forum, and I will be there. So stay tuned for all of the coverage with that, assuming, of course, that the card doesn't massively blow up and get canceled. Nonetheless, it was a fantastic show today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Again, I'm Zain. You can find my work at bjpen.com. You can find Tom's work at Fansided MMA. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Thomas J. Albano and at Bando99. Of course, you can find our show at MMA Outsiders ETB. You can also follow the Empty the Bench podcast network at ETB Network everywhere across social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, wherever you get your social media, it is there. Obviously, going into next week, we will have a star-studded next week of content, with, of course, being the long-awaited UFC 287 event from Miami. Before we get out of here, though, be sure to like and subscribe. So again, that will wrap it up. This has been another episode of the MMA Outsiders. I'm Zain, that's Tom, and we will talk to you next week, as it will officially be April the next time we hit the air.
Yep, can't wait. So it'll be April, spring will be blooming, baseball is back. I'm going to the game on Saturday between the Yankees and Giants. That shall be fun.
And I have tickets to Cubs Cardinals in early May, so I'm excited about that.
Beautiful. Spring is officially springing. And we'll see you next week when we spring into UFC 287. So for Zain, I'm Tom. Good night, everybody. We'll see you later.
Good night, everyone.